We are Rogue Media Sports.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is the Doomsday Podcast, a special edition with the news coming out on Tuesday. Jaylon Smith extension, big news conference over at Frisco at the Star. Ed Werder on the scene to account for that. Ed, we'll get into it in a little while. Welcome back to, I don't know if we get to say welcome back to you, but ESPN. You make the stunning announcement after being laid off 2.5 years ago. You are returning to ESPN. We'll get into that a little bit. But, Ed, for a guy at Jaylon Smith that we had on very early, and we saw his – I wrote this in a column for Pressbox DFW. I think both of us thought it was almost a little delusional when he would say to us, it was a blessing that this happened. I have faith. Back then, it was hard to envision him getting to the moment where he was today.
Yeah, and let's put this in context. In 2016, Jaylon Smith was drafted after Ezekiel Elliott and before Dak Prescott, and today he signed his second NFL contract before either of his more widely acclaimed teammates. And let's keep in mind that, as a rookie, he endured isolation as he was, painstakingly rehabbing his surgically repaired knee, waiting for those damaged nerves and wondering if they'd properly regenerate, never being certain that they would. He endured all of this drudgery and was, virtually ignored as Elliott and Prescott earned rookie acclaim, became offensive starters for a Cowboys team that won a franchise record 11 consecutive games. And won the division and went to the playoffs, and he missed all that. And nobody really paid a lot of attention to what he was doing. But today that diligence and resolve really paid off, and this time it helped him to partially offset the tens of millions of dollars that he lost on that Fiesta Bowl field when you could actually say he was cheap-shotted because he was away from the play when he got blocked late and suffered that horrific knee injury. And fortunately for him and fortunately for the Cowboys, Dr. Dan Cooper, the Cowboys team orthopedic surgeon, did the surgery, really played a big role in convincing the Cowboys that drafting him in the second round was worth the risk. And as Jerry said today, they've gotten the benefit of the risk that they assumed. And he said, when I'm going to take a risk, I want a payout that is phenomenal by any measure. And inordinate, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
Inordinate
reward
for the
Parcells.
risk I took.
Yeah.
As Bill Parcells used to say all the time, I want to bet a little to win a lot, not bet a lot to win a little.
Yeah.
And they won a lot with Jaylon Smith. And let's just real quickly, my last thing is the contract terms. 5 new years, $65 million, including $35.5 million guaranteed. It makes him gives him a third highest paid guarantee and makes him a top 5 paid linebacker.
Yeah. With
only 22 starts in the NFL, and not all of those were healthy starts. Some of those were playing with dropped foot and having a brace on his foot. So an extraordinary story, really. That shouldn't get lost in the bigger picture that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, but it will. And we'll continue to hit on it. We both have admired Jaylon, and he's been a part of the Doomsday Podcast. I think he would say that's his favorite podcast. Frito, before we get to, all this other stuff, the thinly veiled shots at Zeke and Dak today, please play the music. And it is that Doomsday Podcast. Ed has come back from another journey. We had the initial journey out to Cowboys camp and had a nice run out there. And then Ed finalizes a deal with ESPN, has to go right back out there. Ed, I would say that not that we didn't work hard, but we, I would say probably your trip back out there, you may have had to even put in a little more effort. Would that be an accurate statement as you return to ESPN?
There was a little more sweat equity required in my second trip. We worked hard. We did a lot of good things out there, but I probably put on the air somewhere between 24 and 30 pieces in one form or another, whether a live shot, a wraparound sound, a taped element, or my last piece of that visit ran Saturday, and it was this. It was Jerry Jones says that somebody other than Zeke Elliott, Dak Prescott, and Amari Cooper could sign before the threesome, and I suggested that it was Jaylon Smith. Asked Jaylon Smith all of the questions you saw that he was quoted on before the press conference today. So I felt like I saw that one coming to a certain degree. It just seemed like he was the most deserving player. He's been dramatically underpaid, and he's well worth what the Cowboys have paid him. And Jerry said he'd do that kind of deal, again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, which I'm not sure that makes Jaylon feel that great. But
Well, I think Jaylon, I thought that was fascinating to hear what he said. I think it's irked Jerry, understandably so, that Jerry put his neck out for Zeke when Zeke was suspended a couple of years ago. And wasn't that interesting to hear Jaylon Smith? And we'll get into all the Zeke ramifications and the Dak, what all came out of that today. But I thought Jerry, even listening to what Jaylon said today, you talked about the isolation, but Jaylon gave thanks. He said the Cowboys still went ahead and paid me. That first year, I was allowed to be in on the meetings. I was around, and I think he felt a real debt of gratitude that when all these other teams had given up on him when he could have been a top 5 pick, the Cowboys did go ahead and take that risk on him in the second round. And again, this is huge money. I mean, it's not like he got some kind of like the biggest team-friendly deal in the history. I think, by the way, Tyron Smith may have done that one. But, it was $35.5 million guaranteed is an enormous amount of money. That is generational. That is life-changing stuff right there. But I think Jerry, not that Jerry did this whole thing to set an example for other players, but now that he did, that seemed to be what he was up to. But I just feel like Jerry, and you saw it with the emotion. You've seen Jerry, as people get a little older, they tend to get a little more emotion. Jerry has done that for the past 5 or 6 years now. But there was something about just the no quit, the clear-eyed, whatever he calls it, the clear-eyed view that Jaylon had that really seemed to impact Jerry. And I think that's the reason. Jerry also blamed it on a lack of sleep coming back from Chicago in time to be at this news conference. But it really affected Jerry, I think.
Well, it's an interesting correlation to make that Jerry has this press conference for, Jaylon Smith because of the player that he is and the significance of the commitment to him. He's one of their best players on what's shaping up to be a really formidable defense. But you're right in that, hey, this is somebody else I took a risk on. Just like Zeke, I took a risk on you. This player is rewarding me again for the risk that I took on him, and I'm expecting the same from you. Look, I think my overarching takeaway from this whole thing today is this. Jerry Jones and the Cowboys scheduled this press conference late in the afternoon at 4:30. It was long after the team had completed its workday, and it was all done so that Jerry could fly home from CBA meetings in Chicago and be present at the announcement of Jaylon Smith's contract extension. Now, did he want to be there because he was the general manager of record and he's the one who personally authorized the risk that they took and, drafted a linebacker 34th overall who most people in the league really seriously questioned whether he'd play, B, when he would play, and C, at what level would he play when he was cleared to play on the field and overcome the injury. I think unquestionably that was part of the motivation for Jerry to be there. The other part of it, though, I think he wanted to be there to personally deliver a message that could be effective only if delivered by the owner of the team to hold out running back Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott, and Amari Cooper. Without a doubt, that's the motivation. Now, Jerry is not wrong in saying, look, I'm the owner. I have a proprietary interest in this team. We have had a succession of really strong drafts, and we have a lot of really good young talent. And it's my job and Stephen Jones's job to manipulate the salary cap and to keep as many of these players together as possible. It's not necessarily the job of Prescott, Elliott, and Cooper to do the same, but he's urging them to take that into consideration in a way that so far, apparently, they have not.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. And there was a point made at the end of today's news conference about reminding everybody, hey, these Cowboys can make a lot of money. I think he used the word hellacious money because of their association with the Cowboys. I think earlier that kind of fell on deaf ears. I think it will continue to, but I do feel like Jerry, with this deal that he got done, feels a little emboldened. Like, we got in this negotiation, it felt like team was at least part of the it was in the mix. It was in the conversation, the team moving forward. And I don't think he's feeling that in these other conversations. To that point, let's listen to Jerry talk about team building and how Jaylon was a great example of that.
The other thing I want to say here is it is neat that Jaylon understands that when you have a solid roster, you have as many high-quality young players as we have. You have to allocate your resources wisely to keep and have all of those players. You have to do that. That's called team building. And I will assure you that this was about team. It certainly was beneficial to Jason, but I can assure you this was about team. Our goals are to build the best team, and it takes cooperation from both parties when you're doing agreements. He is worth 1,000 words of anything we could say about contracts and the Dallas Cowboys.
And there he was, and Ed, that was in no uncertain terms. The Jerry did not hold anything back, and he said, some of these other players need to kind of keep that in mind a little bit, and that's why today, to me, almost felt like one big. In the Twitter world, we call it a subtweet, where you're kind of doing one thing to kind of send somebody else a message, but you're maybe not as completely directly. That was as thinly veiled as you could be. The message to those other guys were, here's a guy that put the team first. We only have so much of the pie that can be. We have to think about this team moving forward. I don't know if this will help in negotiations. I don't know if this will make any impact. But today was sort of a show of strength of Jerry pointing to an example and saying, this guy came and wants to be a part of this team and felt gratitude and understands that if he does this a certain way, everybody can be happy, including the rest of the team.
Well, that there's a risk involved in that too. You have to be careful about that because you don't want to, create a divide within your team where the three players who aren't signed view Jaylon Smith as a sellout. And it compromises the position that they're in and that they've taken with their own negotiations.
Yeah, too late, by the way.
I thought it was interesting that after the press conference, I followed Jerry out into the hallway, and I asked him about the importance of, this is the first time in my mind that he's backed up his rhetoric, right? He's been saying all along, we have a great young team, and it's my job to keep it together. This is the first time he's done something demonstrative that indicates he's serious about that, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what he was saying is, yeah, you can't just talk all the time. Sometimes your actions have to be consistent with what you're saying. And I thought the other interesting thing that he said was, he said something to the effect of, we have to do a better job with these contracts than we've ever done before. And that's interesting because I think we all agree, and we got this sense from Stephen when we sat him down, right? He pretty much said, in our minds, this is the best collection of talent that we've had and the best depth that we've had since we won those 3 Super Bowls in the 1990s. And this cut is going to be the hardest thing from a personnel standpoint that we've ever had to do in 30 years. So that's how highly they think of their players and the recent drafts that they've had. So they've seen this coming. for a certain amount of time, and they prepared for the inevitable. Hey, we've got to hold the line on some of these contracts, and I think what Jerry's saying right now, and it's primarily aimed at Zeke, because I don't think any of us think that Dak or Amari is going to walk out of camp if their contracts don't get done. The question is, how are you going to get Zeke in for week 1? That's the challenge he faces, and I think he's drawn the line and saying, look, I'm not flexible about this. We've set the precedent of doing contract extensions with players when they have 2 years left. We've done it with Tyron Smith, and now we've done it with Jaylon Smith. And we'll do it with you. But we've got to get some value out of that too. And I don't think Jerry and Steven are altogether wrong on that point. And I don't think they're altogether wrong on the point of, hey, we drafted you in the first round, and one of the things that comes with that for us is we get you under contract control for 5 years. Most players, everybody after the first round, you only get 4 years. That's why Dak's contract is coming up before Zeke's. But we get 5 years of control. We have to get value out of giving that up. So I think they're not altogether wrong on what they're saying about Zeke and what the presentation of Zeke. But now he's taken a pretty dramatic step here in missing all of camp. And I don't know what it's going to take to get him to give up whatever it is he's been pursuing to come in and take a more team-friendly, more reasonable deal.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't think he's going to get paid to be I don't think his contract's going to be higher than Todd Gurley's. I don't. I think it could be better than Le'Veon Bell's.
Yeah.
But I think he's looking at being the second highest paid running back in football. And he's not going to be the highest paid running back in football unless he wants to play out his contract the next 2 years.
Now, maybe, some of these, there's some funny money involved. The biggest money, quarterbacks, it's become this, what is it a year? What is a year? Isn't it funny? Today, nobody was like, he's going to make 11.5 or 12 million this year. Nobody was even doing that. Everybody's like, well, it's a guaranteed. With quarterbacks, it's like they don't even talk about the guaranteed. 34 million a year. It becomes all about that. It's because it's those enormous contracts. I thought it was interesting. Afterwards, it was brought up to Jerry. Since we've had the podcast, since we've done our last one when we were out in California and doing all that, have you seen, Ed, this back and forth that's gone about the Jerry the other night and Hawaii's joking Zeke who? And it was obvious. Jerry and Zeke knows that. Zeke has to, but the agent dug in. He saw maybe a way to score a negotiating point. Well, I felt, and also Zeke felt disrespected today with no sparkle in his eye, no gleam in his eye. I'm being funny right here. Jerry said, I've earned the right to joke with Zeke. And I think that goes back to what he did 2 years ago.
2017 when
Correct.
Ezekiel Elliott was suspended. Jerry fought the suspension harder than Zeke himself fought the suspension. Almost put himself at odds with many of the owners in the NFL. Really jeopardized his position on many committees and took on the commissioner in a very direct way that's highly uncommon in the NFL. And he did it all. I mean, he didn't do it for Zeke except for the fact that he recognized Zeke's essential to winning, football games, and that's what ultimately everybody wants to accomplish. And ultimately, that's how he's going to determine the value of Ezekiel Elliott now too. And I will say this, we when we were at camp, he was talking about after the first preseason game. Hey, Tony Pollard, 4 carries this first preseason game. He can be an every down back. He can carry the load if we don't have Zeke. And then he said something to the same effect after the game the other night.
Yeah.
But I do think that they do like Pollard and they think that he's a good player. But ideally, they want him to be Alvin Kamara or in New Orleans or James White in New England. They could see a situation where even with Zeke playing, he gets 16 to 18 touches in a game, but they want them both on the field. They don't want to start the season with this rookie from Memphis who was a second string player there or kind of a specialty player there. That's not what they see in this kid, and that's not why they got him.
By the way, this team would have no clue how to execute that. This 16 to 18 touches. They even said something similar about Tavon. Let's get Tavon 10 to 12 touches a game. What do you get? Like 2 or 3 at the most. I mean, they were using Jordan Lewis on jet sweeps, for goodness sakes. So I don't think, Sean Payton, Kamara, when he has those weapons, he will. He's like, okay, we'll figure out a way to use all these things. Cowboys haven't really proved that they can do that. I did like Pollard the other night. I had to come on my radio show and say, hey, I some apologies are in order because this guy does look really good. And I had to laugh because part of Jerry even brought it up. Hey, he almost got Dak killed. On that failed blitz
it's really
pickup.
Witten's fault.
Yeah, that's what I saw. I saw these tweets. They're like, "Hey guys, actually that was Jason Witten was supposed to be over there," and so
I
maybe
think it's fair to blame them both, but maybe Witten deserves 70% of the blame, and Pollard 30%. The other thing that strikes me, and I was over there for practice and everything today, and Amari Cooper didn't practice again, and he's dealing with this heel injury that he's had since August 6th, and he's missed a lot of practice time and a lot of reps with Dak. And maybe that's inconsequential, maybe it's not. But he was saying that he feels like he's making progress every day, and that the pain is like a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, and that this is something he could play with if necessary. Mentioning that he had the same problem when he was a sophomore at Alabama and as a Raiders rookie and had a 1,000-yard season there. And the reason I bring him up again is he's not only part of this trio of players that they're trying to sign, but in some ways, he's created the predicament that they face right now with the stress under the salary cap, right? He's the guy that they didn't expect to be dealing with in this circumstance, but they so badly misjudged the receiver position last year that in the middle of the year, they not only surrendered their first-round pick to go get a wide receiver in Amari Cooper, but they put themselves in a position where now they're going to have to pay something close to the top of the market for a receiver, whereas drafting a receiver and developing a receiver like Gallup, you get the benefit of 4 years of relatively, or 3 years of relatively cheap labor before you wind up paying the guy a big contract. Yeah. So Cooper's kind of the guy whose acquisition has put them in a position where it's become difficult to manage the cap with the players that, like Zeke and Dak, that they figured they were probably going to have to be negotiating with at this point.
Do you think Zeke feels disrespected by Cooper? Is that really what's at work here?
I doubt Zeke is all that offended by any of this.
Yeah. I think Zeke's doing okay. I like how they said, well, he's back in Cabo. And they're like, wait, what about these pictures? He came back to DFW. They're like, well, he'd get his hair cut and get some clothes.
He does need a haircut.
And he got back to – it looks fine to me. Have you seen some of these memes or whatever of like a larger – like a real big.
It's a great look for him,
Zeke. It's not a bad look that he has. This is going to be fascinating to see how this all gets done. I think Amari's handled his thing beautifully because his whole thing, and it's how DeMarcus handled it. Not this past offseason, but the offseason before. Amari's like, I'm due $13.5 million this year. It's pretty good money.
Yeah, I'm fine if I play with that.
Yeah, if I got to play for that,
I have all the leverage next year. But when you're the Cowboys, like, you can't give up a first-round pick and get a season and a half out of a guy.
No.
They have to sign him to justify what they paid for him, and he justified it initially with what he did the second half of the season and the way he changed their offense and allowed them to win the division and go win a playoff game. But part of that equation is you sign the guy long term, and he's 24 years old, and that was one of the explanations they gave for their willingness to make the deal was he's 24. And we talked to Amari out at camp, and he said one of the reasons he wanted to come play in Dallas was he knew he had a young running back and a young quarterback, and the three of them could kind of grow together and win together, and who knows what they were all capable of.
One thing, Ed, that's fascinating to me, I'm way into the NBA. What's different about the NBA and the NFL, we all know that at some point Zeke's going to show up, and it could get ugly, and maybe it'll come down to the final, but it's just really hard to envision a way where he does, like, pulls a Le'Veon Bell and sits out the entire season. In the NBA, the players have so much more power with their contracts and the way it is. Like, at this point, if Zeke said right now, if he were an NBA star and he said, I want out, they would find a way to trade him. Like that. That's how much just enormous. Jerry, and that's one of the reasons Jerry can say, I've got this backbone. I can hold out. They still know they have the hammer. I mean, they can look at him and go, really? You're just going to sit out this season?
Well, he doesn't accomplish anything, unlike Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell knew if he sat out the whole season, he was going to become an unrestricted free agent and get paid by somebody else and get to choose the team he played for. Obviously, the market wasn't what he expected because he wound up with the Jets for less than he anticipated, but that's not the situation Elliott's facing. Like, he can sit out the whole year, and he hasn't gained anything. He's lost his, $4 million salary, except that $4 million salary now becomes a salary he gets next year instead of this year. And now his $9 million salary for the final year of his deal is paid the year after that. So all he's doing is setting himself back another year or so. I think he'd be foolish. If he's reasonable, I think the deal gets done, but I don't know if he's being reasonable or not.
Yeah, and that is hard to know. It's hard to know because right now it seems like he jumped ahead of he thought he jumped ahead of everybody. He didn't exactly jump ahead of Jaylon Smith because that deal did get done, but he jumped ahead of Dak, and he jumped ahead of Amari, and now he's in a position to really put a significant hurdle in this season if he missed first couple of games, although there is some thought the Cowboys have an easy schedule early. Could you see how you could do? I mean, can you beat the New York Giants without Zeke? Probably so. Could you go 3-1 without Zeke? Probably so. And
but again, there's risk involved.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
Jerry's played this game once before and he lost big time.
Yeah, and you're right. And you were covering the team. Were you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was a beat writer for
the
the team.
A beat writer, and that was obviously the famous Emmitt Smith. Now, Ed, this has been fascinating today because Jaylon, watching all this, how it comes together. And watching them get one player signed when they got these other three out there. We'll continue to watch all these things. I'm glad we got to do this today. I'm glad they signed Jaylon because it kind of bumped up our timetable. We were going to wait till after Saturday's game and do something and react to that. I love doing it right now. I do have, Ed, I put together just a huge long list of notes from Hawaii. I mean, enormous list of my legal pad of all the things that I saw.
For what purpose?
To just react to what I'm seeing from this defense, some of these players, some of these guys. I want to hit on them a couple. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about the Dak, Zeke, Jaylon?
Well, I think
before I moved on to that,
I just think that to kind of finish where we started about to let Jaylon Smith have his day because he certainly deserves it.
We can do that. Yeah.
I just don't think there are too many stories in the NFL that are better than that, and. I guess the best way to illustrate how far he's come with the contract extension that he got today is to go back and look, and I have I reached out to some general managers and head coaches at the time the Cowboys picked him to see what their thought process was on him. And here's three that I wanted to share from a GM in the NFC on Jaylon Smith after the Cowboys took him in the second round. I would have considered the sixth round. It's 50-50 he ever plays again. A head coach. We would have considered him in the fourth round. He'll play again, but the level of play completely unpredictable. And another GM, this one from an AFC team, said we wouldn't have ever considered him. That's what we pay our doctors for. So they had him off their board, and now he's one of the dominant young linebackers in football.
Okay, and what was that team doctor, Ed? Do you want to throw that out there? I do think, Ed, today, I would have had Dr. Dan Cooper up at the podium. I would have put him on the dais up there.
And Britt Brown, the trainer, who worked extensively.
But Britt got a major shout out. I like that. Like a second father to me is what Jaylon said. In fact, I heard from some of the medical staff earlier, and I think they felt really good about how that was presented. But I would have extended both of those guys, Britt and Dr. Cooper. I would have also given them extensions.
I think those guys have non-disclosure clauses. They're not allowed to talk to the media. Jerry doesn't
like to be contradicted by the doctors. That's never stopped you from getting contracts, non-disclosure. I think you could get those numbers. I'd like to get a look at Britt Brown's contract. I hope he got an extension, but good. I think everybody in the organization. This is one of those deals. We beat. You're right to bring this up, by the way, because we beat them up on some of these risks that don't work out. We're still kind of waiting to see. Gregory's had some really good moments. We don't know exactly how that story's going to end. Some of the risks they've taken over the years. Sean Lee. It's been up and down. I think overall you would say that was worth the risk for the kind of career he's had for the Cowboys, but that one's been up and down. But for a second-round pick, I think you're okay. They've had some that just, they just went by the wayside. Is whether it be drug suspension. David Irving. Now, of course, they didn't give up much on him. But they've had some guys that just...
They signed him off Kansas City's practice.
I think you're right. And then they had Rolando McClain. That was still not a bad deal. They gave up 6 or 7. The man...
If you don't mind all the embarrassments of, getting suspended. And
that happens. Yeah, I think he might have
too much of the purple drank or whatever it was.
He might have burned down his own home. We don't know. We don't know what all went on with Rolando.
I think we were going to talk about some guys that...
Yes. Yes, and I'm glad you went back, though, because I wanted to give Jaylon Smith. So what I did the other night, I don't know if you've read this on PressBox DFW. In fact, I put it up on our Doomsday Facebook page, and we really like our community there. A lot of people access us through the Facebook page, and I write these long
How many exactly?
columns. What do you mean, thousands? Thousands
Tens
of people.
Thousands?
Yeah, okay. I think so, especially these so when I put up these columns, I'll do like 1,000 words on the preseason game. There were a couple of young guys I wanted to mention. I like the guy we talked to, his college coach, his college position coach, or the defense coordinator at UCF at the time. Tristan Hill has shown me a few things. I know he's kind of raw, and I don't think he's going to be. It'll be a little bit like Taco. I hope he plays better earlier in his career than Taco has, but I like how he's blowing up plays and kind of, he'll do some spin moves. He'll do some interesting things. And the other guy, by the way, that is taking over right now, I'm talking about Tristan Hill, of course, with that, but Malik Collins. Does Malik Collins not look like was he third-round pick out of Nebraska, I believe? What a monster this guy is. You think Malik's out there looking for his contract?
Sure. He's probably one of the next few guys to get it. I would say that in talking to the coaches and watching the games and the practices, the two guys who stand out to me are Jordan Lewis and Anthony Brown, the two slot corners.
How about that?
And that could be...
Always been a slot corner guy.
They could be important because Byron Jones, we don't know. He's missed all of the offseason.
What was that setback about?
He had hip surgery. They kind of thought he'd practice this week, and unlike... DeMarcus Lawrence and Tyrone Crawford, he was not on the field today. He was not been activated off the pup like those two guys were. They practiced on a limited basis, but so we don't know how far away Byron Jones is. But I think they feel like Anthony Brown could bump outside and play as an outside starting corner if Byron doesn't make it back. But you'll want to feel good about 4 corners in today's game, and they really only have 3 if Byron's not part of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And a couple more players I want to mention. Big 95. Love seeing the big boy, the big man, Christian Covington. He just was enormous. Now, he came from a different team. He had been with somebody else. They brought him in. I think he's going to, Malik, Antoine Woods, he's going to add to that depth. They got beat up at the line of scrimmage by the Rams in that divisional playoff game. I like Covington. You talk about a big old monster, and then you bring in Kerry Hyder, who had 8.5 sacks that one season for Detroit. He's the former Texas Tech defensive lineman. Texas Tech known for having some quick, undersized defensive linemen. He's fast. Hyder's getting his hands up.
Jason
Garrett
was praising him today for his contributions, his hustle, his knowledge of the scheme, being in great shape, relentlessly pursuing the ball, making plays on the ball. So, yeah, he's a guy that's really impressed him.
And how about the Hawaiian the trip and then that number 44, Oklahoma State's Justin Phillips? Did you like that no-look interception?
That's pretty good.
My gosh, just kind of up the seam, just reaches up there and snags that ball.
My understanding is he did not fulfill his assignment on that play, so it was one of those nice play, but how about playing within the scheme and being where you're supposed to be, because there was a guy open behind you that was supposed to be your responsibility.
I don't know.
That happens sometimes.
I know. I mean, the lack of takeaways this team has, and the lack of interceptions, I'll go ahead and let Justin Phillips have that mistake. That's a good mistake.
Yeah, you want the ball, but at the same time, you've got to coach the point that, hey, you had an assignment that you need to honor, because more times than not, it's going to get us beat.
I think Justin Phillips has earned the right to freelance. Also, what about my man Alumba? How about that guy?
I like his kit.
His what?
His kit in practice. His kit. He wears the long blue, bright, like royal blue sleeves and royal blue leggings. He looks like he's Richard Sherman out there.
Oh yeah,
he's got
I didn't
that long,
even know about
lanky
all that.
body, but he really stands out just from a uniform standpoint.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. I like the way
Isn't
you put
he
that.
6'4"?
Alumba.
He's 6'4" or something like that.
His name Donovan? Who's Donovan? There's Donovan Wilson. I like Alumba so much. There's a guy from A&M that hits people. I haven't seen him lately. There's just a lot of people.
Clearly, we should stop talking.
No. It's fine. It's fine. Now the guy they got to help. They got to help this poor. Who is number 65? That's the guy I'd like to help. That poor tackle. Did you see it? Left tackle. Oh my goodness, he was getting blown up. It's not Campo. It's another guy. Campo's 63. Number 65. You got to get him off the offensive line. You got to send him. Oh, from Clemson, Hyatt.
Oh,
Mitch
yeah,
Hyatt.
they had high hopes for him.
Oh, my gosh, he is getting exposed.
He's a guy that they've really been disappointed by because they really thought they had something there. And, they haven't had McGovern hasn't been out practicing yet. So that's an issue. Tyron Smith is practicing on a limited basis. Zach Martin has a bad back. The last thing that can happen to this team is for them to not have Elliott and then to have some of the offensive line issues that they had last year. I think the thing that really got overlooked last year was Ezekiel Elliott led the NFL in rushing by a huge margin, even though 3 of their offensive linemen missed significant playing time. And I mean, Travis Frederick missed the whole year, but Tyron Smith missed 3 games. Zach Martin missed games for the first time in his career. I think he missed 2. And yet Zeke Elliott still led the league in rushing.
Yeah. And, one more I wanted to mention. A good point by you. Devin Smith, number 15, former second-round pick by the Jets. And, boy, who would ever know that the Jets could let a good player get away? But he did have 2 ACLs, and so that was a big reason why it just didn't work out. But, if he could stay healthy, the quickness, the speed, how about that throw, too, from Cooper Rush? I know you have been very tough on Cooper Rush, but I thought Cooper Rush, great timing on the throw, and Devin Smith snags that thing in the corner of the end zone.
Sanjay Lal, I happened to arrive at his media gathering a little bit late today after practice, but he was praising Devin Smith, and he even said something like he can moss guys, like he can go over the top of guys and bring it down like Randy Moss. And I verified that was the Moss he was talking about, not Santana Moss or Winston Moss or some of these other Mosses. He was talking about Randy Moss. So if he has any Randy Moss characteristics as far as it pertains to performing on the field, that would be a good thing.
Keep talking. I'm thinking of more Mosses. I think there's a Tony Moss.
I thought it was pretty good. I came up with 3.
I know. I was just sitting here thinking, but you made me. Winston Moss used to play at University of Texas.
Bucks linebacker.
Is that
went to Green Bay. Didn't he
Wait,
get trouble?
no. Did Winston Moss play for A&M or Texas? I feel like Winston Moss played for University of Texas. No, keep going. Did he get in trouble at some point?
Yeah, he got in trouble in Green Bay last year for something he tweeted about Aaron Rodgers. And he wound up
that Winston Moss.
He got fired as a linebackers coach up there shortly thereafter.
Okay. There's an
I think it was after Mike McCarthy got fired.
There's an old UT player named Moss, and that's who I was kind of thinking of. But you're talking about a kind of a modern-day Winston Moss. So those are good things. Poor John Vay Johnson, you're going to have to put him on the practice squad. The man's just not consistent enough. You had a muff punt, Reggie Davis, the muff punt. You're always looking for these receiver phenoms. They have not been consistent enough. Don't think either one of those guys will make the team. I guess they'll save a spot for Noah. I mean, he's been out.
He can play tight end. So
he can be.
He's got enough versatility that kind of distinguishes himself from the rest of the receivers in a way that could certainly benefit them, especially given all the injuries they have at tight end right now.
Yeah,
him included.
Boy, I can tell. I mean, you always, even for the Doomsday podcast, you had great information, but for some reason, in these past couple weeks, you even have more information. I don't know what has happened.
Team on a regular basis
real quick, Ed, give us the golly, look at Frito just taking some copious notes. I don't know what he's trying to tell me, but
there's been 16 Mosses in the NFL. There's been 4 Mosleys. Wait, there's been more than that. Look at all the Mosleys here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Most are overpaid.
8, 9, 10 Mosleys.
There's a C.J. Mosley now.
Yeah, he's overpaid.
Yes.
No, he's a good player.
There have been 2 C.J. I'm looking up order now.
There'll be none of those.
There's
a great soccer player named Werder.
There's no orders. Yeah. Hey, while
Werder Bremen or
while Frito and you continue to do this, real quick, give us because people kind of want to know our Doomsday, and they can, they've read it in the New York Daily News and other Daily News and other places, other tabloids. But
tabloid career.
Yeah, that's right. But what exactly happened, Ed? I mean, this is kind of a rare territory for someone to get laid off. It was I wouldn't call it acrimonious because you did handle it. I thought you handled it well, but you came back after your time away finally came to a fruition. It's like, okay, Ed can go take a job somewhere else. You basically were being paid not to work somewhere else. And then at the end of your time, it comes to an end. You're all of a sudden going to be a free agent, and ESPN hires you back. Ed, how did this happen?
You say that with some sort of disdain.
No. It's just kind of, I mean, it's an interesting.
How could they make such a bad decision?
It's an interesting process.
What happened was I tried to stay relevant by doing this show, by doing Westwood One, by being prolific on social media in a way that aggravates you. And I succeeded on all three of those levels. But I guess I met a lot. So I met a lot of people at Super Bowls and so forth in recent years, interviewed with them. But ultimately, with like a year left on my deal with ESPN, when they changed presidents, I reached out to people there and said, look, I've got a year left before I can go wherever I want to go, or with anybody who will have me and work for them. But I'd really like to know what interest there is, if any, from my first choice, and that's ESPN. That's kind of where I always felt I belonged. And fortunately, they were receptive to that idea. I went up there in December and met.
Were they shocked at all? Like when they heard that, did that surprise them that after the way it ended and the weird nature of all those layoffs, did it surprise them to hear from you?
I don't think it surprised them because they were. I mean, I worked there for 20 years. A lot of the people who are there are lifelong friends, and so between my maintaining those friendships and then seeing people at games I covered for Westwood One or at Super Bowls and playoff games, you interact with a lot of those people, and they have a new president. And, I don't think it was Jimmy Pitaro, the president now, wasn't the guy who let me go or let the other people go. I think I look at it like I'm the only one, I believe, of the 100 of people who got let go who so far has been brought back on a full-time basis. And there are other people who are equally deserving. So I feel very fortunate to get that second opportunity. And I mean, it's like I stepped right in, and it was like I'd never left, from the standpoint of I'm at Cowboys camp. I'm covering the same people I've always covered. I'm working in the field with the same producers and same crews I was working with 2 years ago. And I'm taking and throwing to the same anchors on the SportsCenter desk and the NFL Live desk as I did 2 years ago. So it's like nothing changed. And that was kind of a good feeling.
Yeah. No, it is a good feeling. You don't want it to feel completely foreign to you. It all kind of came back to you. And the only thing that's changed is you're several years older.
Just two. But, I got the feeling that when the anchors, like it started with Hannah Storm, and then, subsequently throughout the day, I think
you and Hannah have always had kind of a contentious relationship.
There just seemed a lot of enthusiasm by my colleagues on the air, and I appreciated that.
That's very nice. Did at any point in the negotiations did you say, no, I mean that. That is nice. At any point did you say, I'm only coming back if I can bring Mosley with me? Did that come up?
We didn't get that far.
Oh, goodness.
In the negotiations before they said yes.
You thought that might be a little much
to ask? Might be
a
deal breaker, so I kind of stayed away from it. Maybe in the next contract.
The next.
I don't think anyone's aware of your interest. Are they aware of your interest?
No, I'm not really. I mean, but I am with ESPN. It's just it's a different affiliate. It's just down there in the Hill Country, Central Texas. You can listen to me daily on ESPN Central Texas. Ed, good stuff. Glad you're back. Good stuff. Frito Nation Productions. Always good to be out here in the studio. It's a little warm in here today, but other than that, thought. Well, look at that green screen. He has done a great job. That green screen really looks good. I wish we would utilize it at some point. Great to be here and back on with you. Doomsday Podcast, special edition. Jaylon Smith with the Cowboys until 2000.
They're all special editions. At some point, should we just be doing a show?
2025. Good night, everybody.
bargains have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.